The sedan market is dead, they said, but apparently nobody told Hyundai because the launch of the all-new Hyundai Elantra during the 2025 Manila International Motor Show was perhaps one of the biggest surprises of the year, at least so far. And yes, the Elantra already was here in the form of the high-performance N variant, but we weren't expecting the sort of more regular model, such as this hybrid that we'll be testing today. But we're here to go beyond the hype and the buzz of its launch to see if it's actually a good car. And hopefully, our expectations are indeed met. Alright, so we're now behind the wheel of the Hyundai Elantra Hybrid Premium. I'm gonna go straight to the point here because the biggest surprise that this car has to offer is its dynamics. This car is surprisingly fun to drive and surprisingly capable around the twisties. Now, granted, as a daily driver, it probably won't make much of a difference. However, the benefit of a great chassis and a great handling car is that in an emergency situation, it doesn't panic. And this car also has the added bonus of actually being engaging. Okay, admittedly, there are more engaging to drive rivals, such as the Honda Civic and the Mazda 3, but this comes pretty close to them. And, you have to remember that Hyundai actually poached a couple of engineers from BMW and other European brands, which probably explains why this chassis is so good. And the best part is this platform doesn't come at the compromise of comfort because this rides very well. The ride can be best described as supple. You don't feel much of the bumps. And sort of among like Civics and Mazda 3s, the ride is softer on this one. And the very capable dynamics of this chassis doesn't come at the expense of comfort. The ride, it can be best described as supple. It's smooth, it's a touch on the soft side, but not too soft in a way that the car just heaves and bobs everywhere it goes. It certainly rides better than a Toyota Corolla Altis, and it's definitely more composed compared to a BYD CL5. Now, granted, the CL5, you could argue it's up against subcompact vehicles because of its price, but size-wise, this is what you're looking at here. So the Hyundai Elantra strikes a very neat balance between like a Honda Civic and the Mazda 3 in terms of ride and like handling. Like so far, it's sounding overly positive, but there's just one or two things that I'd like to be improved in this car. Now, one would be the brake pedal feel. Not that it's grabby or any of that, but you still get the sense that you're driving a hybrid, and hybrids typically have grabby brakes. This one to a lesser extent, but it still could be improved ever so slightly. Now, what about performance? Well, it's got a 1.6-liter engine, an Atkinson cycle 1.6-liter engine, and it is very, very efficient. Now, you can easily get over 20 kilometers per liter with this one. In light traffic, you're probably going to look at about 25, so wonderfully efficient. One thing I did notice about this is that the battery regeneration system or the battery recharging system is excellent. It actually does a fine job of bumping up the energy levels again rather than like letting it deplete all the way and like struggle to recharge. This one does, it always tries to recharge itself. And that means, that battery level, which is shown on the instruments cluster, it's not going to deplete to a level that like you totally don't have hybrid drive anymore. This car, as much as possible, prioritizes EV energy. Now, one thing I did notice about the when it's in EV mode, pulling away from a stop isn't like super quick. It takes its time, but not in a way that it feels slow. It just takes its time a little bit when accelerating in EV mode. Of course, you can keep it like hybrid mode, just so you have that extra kick from the engine. But if it's an EV priority, the electric motor does take a while to wake up. But, you can't have it all. And remember, this is still a 1.6-liter engine, and the smaller displacement means it's not exactly going to have the same amount of torque or power that you'd expect from a larger capacity hybrid. But overall, performance is good, especially fuel economy. Now, before I tell you what the space is like here, or what the cabin materials are like, I just have to point out just how good the forward visibility is in the new Elantra. Because, it looks very sleek and coupe-like, but forward visibility is fantastic because everything's set down low. You have a good view out the front, and, it doesn't look like you're seated way down low. I mean, you can by setting the seat really low, but in this case, you have a fairly rakish windshield, which is usually a recipe for poor visibility, but it's totally not the case here because Hyundai made the effort of making this cowl very, very low. And that also means you can easily position the car in tight spots. Like, never did I feel like, am I gonna hit anything, or is the corner of the bumper gonna snag on something on this one? This is huge on Hyundai's part, and I really appreciate that because visibility these days in cars are so bad that, there's a reason why all these cameras exist. And, there was also a reason why we could easily maneuver big vehicles without cameras or sensors because visibility was great. So that's a huge plus for the Elantra. I can't say the same about the rear visibility though, because the seat pillar is pretty thick, but at least you can easily see where you're going in this Elantra. Right, so for cabin materials, we're gonna start off with the door panel, and I will admit that, okay, there is a fair amount of hard plastic in here, like right on top of the door here. Although, bumawi naman sila, they have soft panels right here by the door pulls and door trims. Now moving towards the dashboard, the driver's side area, you have a leatherette steering wheel, nice to hold, nice to touch. Almost feels European even. And I can say the same about the top of the dash. Of course, you still have soft touch materials, top of the dash, even on the passenger side. Where a lot of hard plastic exists is right here in the center. So here and here, here, and even this grab handle here is pretty hard plastic. But the thing I noticed is, Hyundai put the nice feeling touches where your hands commonly go. So that's of course with the steering wheel and with these buttons. These buttons are particularly nice to touch. They're very deft, they're very soft. There's an air of quality in them. And the same goes with the knobs and the dials. Now for the screen, I wouldn't say it's on the small side, but I saw reviews of this in other markets and they get a much larger screen. Now if you get the larger screen, the buttons you see here, they're relocated towards the top of this center console. But I'm not really complaining. It's still nicely laid out. Not the highest resolution, I will admit. And some people will say, oh, it looks a bit on the basic side. But you know what? There is beauty in simplicity here because it's so easy to navigate. It's so easy to use. It's simple, no fuss, and you still have hard buttons on the side in case you get really lost in them, which is almost impossible because as it is, the UX of this is already pretty top-notch. Now for the instrument cluster, which is digital, which is what everyone expects these days from this sort of segment of car. There are multiple displays, and that will depend on the drive mode. So you can change your drive mode by the button down here. Now for the rest of the display, of course, you have your trip meter, so trip, timer, your average fuel economy. You can change your settings from here. I mean, not just the display settings, but also, how many clicks of the one-touch signal do you want? Do you want 3 clicks, 5 clicks, or 7 clicks? And actually, Hyundai is the only one I know who offers that. When do you want the power door locks to activate? Stuff like that. There's a lot of adjustability here in the instrument cluster. Now, unlike the Europeans, I like the fact that, the Koreans and the Japanese don't like the fact that, everyone's shoving functions in the instrument cluster. So there's still a lot of hard buttons here. Like it's right here on the steering wheel. It's clearly marked, clearly displayed, easy to use. You don't need a user's manual to get the hang of it. Same can be said about the infotainment system. As I mentioned earlier, lots of hard buttons and dials. Of course, your climate control. It's on a separate panel as well. And, that means you don't have to take your eyes off the wheel and you don't have to struggle to aim your finger where, if you just want to adjust the AC and whatnot. So again, props to the South Koreans and the Japanese. Thank you for keeping buttons in cars. Amusingly, it still has a good old gear shifter, not a gear selector, a gear shifter. Now, I come to expect from Hyundai that their electrified models come with their electronic gear selector, like in the Santa Fe. But this is a nice pleasant change. It does occupy a bit of space, but honestly, I don't really mind it. And in case you've noticed, the driver's cockpit really is a cockpit to a point that it shuts out the passenger because of this grab handle here. And the screen itself is tilted towards me. Hyundai, they've been making a lot of effort into making their cars more driver-oriented, driver-focused, and it's displayed in a lot of their products. So, what about some surprise and delight features? So sadly, you don't get the chilled seats, although those are reserved for the more expensive Hyundai products, but you do get a wireless charging pad right down here. You still get a USB-A port, interestingly enough, but of course, Hyundai moving along with the times. There's also a USB-C port to go along with it, plus a 12-volt socket, something I haven't seen in a while. Now, I know I've been saying a lot about the front area already, but okay, this is the last bit. I wish the bottle holders on the doors were bigger. They're actually pretty small, and you'll actually struggle to fit in a half-liter bottle in there. But the cup holders themselves are pretty huge because this is a fairly fat tumbler, and there's actually some wiggle room left in it. So because this is an international product, it's a truly global model. There's a lot of space here, and it's also reflected in the size of the cup holders. And while we're on the topic of space, absolutely no problems here in the front, although I am not the best judge of space because of my height. But when you think about it, okay, like Koreans are pretty tall, so there's a lot of adjustability in the seat and in the driving position. So they really made a car that's accessible for a lot of heights. Now, I am doing my best impression of a 6-footer seated in front, so I've actually moved the seat all the way back. And you know what? There's still a good amount of space here. You could probably put in someone well over 5'7" at the back of this Elantra, and they still have more than sufficient legroom. The seats themselves, they're a touch on the low side, although there is good enough under-thigh support. I do have to say that. I mean, again, this car is made for a global market, so people of different sizes, they have to take that into consideration. Visibility here at the back, well, okay, the windows in front are a lot bigger. Here at the back, I wouldn't say they're tiny windows, but yeah, it is noticeably less. But then again, this is a sedan with a very rakish profile, so I mean, it's still not bad. Now, hip room, all good. Same with shoulder room. And of course, you probably noticed this from the previous review. It's still here in the Elantra. So Elantra, of course, comes with ISOFIX mounts, although my child seat does not have ISOFIX. Still, it's pretty easy to put in, and it's pretty easy to load it inside here too, despite the fact that this roofline is pretty low. You do have to watch out when you're loading in your child, though, because they might bump their heads here. But other than that, it's typical sedan, and the length of the vehicle reflects the space inside, so props to Hyundai there. As for the headroom situation, well, I have about this much, so maybe if you're over 5'7", you're gonna start brushing the headliner a little bit, but nothing, a little slouch will do. And speaking of the backrests themselves, they're nice and well inclined. They're not too much, or they're not too upright, so it's actually a pleasant place to be in. And you also have 3 headrests to go along with it. Interestingly, I found a feature here that I haven't seen in quite some time, and that is a 2-point seat belt for the center passenger. You don't get a 3-point seat belt here for the center. You get this rather old school arrangement, which is peculiar in this day and age, because almost every car in this segment I know of has 3-point all the way. So what's the center like? So there's a bit of a transmission tunnel here in the center. It's not too intrusive, but yeah, I would say this is a true 5-seater sedan, and it's wide enough to easily accommodate them. Now, other surprise and delight features here at the back, of course, you have the de rigueur rear AC vents, and you get 2 USB-C ports here at the back. Something interesting I did just find out literally just now. You don't get a seat back pocket, at least for this side, but you do get one for the passenger side. So storage situation, it's a bit on the limited side, but you know what, it's not bad at all. Got loads of room here. Maybe not much on the headroom front, but overall nice back seats to be in. But perhaps one of the reasons why sedans have fallen out of favor compared to SUVs and crossovers is because of the trunk size. Now, sedan trunks aren't small per se, but when you consider like SUVs and crossovers, they have vertical space to their advantage. But that's not to say that the Elantra is impractical. In fact, it's far from it, because when you open the trunk, you are greeted by about 450 liters of space in there. And what's good about it is the floor itself is pretty wide. In the this section of the trunk, it's a you know, there's a fair amount of space. And even when you go further inside, and it's still pretty wide. Now, what's amazing is, you know, this is on a multi-link suspension arrangement, and while it's great for handling, it usually eats up a lot of cargo space. So Hyundai did a fine job in packaging this. Now, interestingly, if you go for the 1.6 liter and 1.6 liter GL, they use a different rear suspension arrangement. They use a torsion bar, which saves on space, but they actually have the same cargo capacity either way. Now, as you can see, my daughter's baby carriage is there, easily fits, and you can even throw in a lot of groceries along the way. Now, of course, people will be asking, is there a spare tire? So we shall find out the answer together. And yes, this is a hybrid with a spare tire. So that is a huge plus for people who always ask us, does this hybrid come with a spare tire? All right, so is the Hyundai Elantra's return to the Philippines all hype? Actually, it's not, because in case you weren't listening earlier, I just really like the way it drives. I mean, if you're buying a car solely on how it feels on the road, this is a very, very good candidate. And you know, there's a lot to like about it, which brings us to the pros and cons of this car. So pros, of course, was the brilliant chassis of this car. Drives well, rides well, no unnecessary movements, surprisingly engaging. I mean, yes, there are sportier options, but again, this car, you know, overall, this is a nice blend of everything you would like in a daily driver. I mean, this chassis, brilliant. And then there's the fuel economy. I mean, it beats the old range extended hybrids by quite a significant margin. And, you know, we made zero effort to hypermile in this car, and it still returns fantastic economy. Performance, it's good. I wouldn't say it's like super sprightly, but you know what, for the horsepower output, it looks deceiving, but it actually punches above its weight. So you can put that in the pros as well. Space efficiency as well, because, you know, it's a pretty long car, and I do like the fact that, you know, it reflects that in its interior. Features-wise, it's actually pretty well equipped too. One or two missing things. It doesn't have a front camera or a 360 camera, but you know, all in all, it's pretty well equipped. This premium variant also comes with advanced driver assists, which are pretty good, although some people might find it a touch on the sensitive side. But you know, generally pretty good advanced driver assist system. And the price. Now, okay, so this one retails for $1,680,000. When you think about it, okay, that sounds expensive, but compare it to the Honda Civic EHEV, RS EHEV, this is 300,000 pesos less than that. Sure, it doesn't have the punch and the pull of the Civic and the sportiness, but given the talents of this car as it is, this is already hugely impressive. So 300K saving right there. Now, I know if some of you will argue, well, what about the BYD Seal 5? Well, to be honest, malayo siya, especially in terms of driving engagement and the chassis tuning and the space efficiency. There's a lot, you know, that this does better. Of course, a big test will answer those, but you know, in terms of packaging, this feels a bit smarter. Okay, the BYD Seal 5 has more features, but you know, as a car as a whole, I think this is a better vehicle. But what about the cons? Well, I do wish there were more soft touch plastics inside. That would, you know, make it feel more premium. Aesthetically, the design looks good, but you know, some of the materials kind of don't live up to that. Headroom could be slightly better, but yeah, it's a very minor gripe. And really, it's the door pockets. You know, it kind of limits the usability, but at least it does have big cup holders. There aren't a lot of storage solutions, but at least, you know, it's generally spacious inside. Well, all in all, though, the buzz has been totally worth it. I mean, it's worth the hype, and really, if you're in the market for a hybrid sedan, please do consider this model. And if 1680M is a little too much for you, you can still get a hybrid version of this for 200,000 pesos less. So that's the GLS variant, though you do lose the advanced driver assist. Though some people will argue, well, I don't really need that because I am my own driver assist. So yeah, that's something to consider. So it's one of the lesser priced electrified sedans in the market today. That's, you know, this size. And you know, if you were going to give it a score, this is probably the easiest 9 we'll give to a car.